Well, hello everyone. Hope everything's going well in IT4990. We're in the 8th week and a few things I'd like to look over. Uh, in case you probably don't know, I do a lot of photography, and one piece of technology, the memory for storing data has become so much cheaper than it has in the past. A few years ago, I stood outside in very cold weather at midnight waiting for a couple hours to buy this 1 gigabyte memory card at a super low price of $20. And I got one of a few that were there, and I really felt lucky. This past Black Friday, I went into one of the big stores and bought a Black Friday special. Didn't have to wait in line, didn't have to fight or anything, and bought a 16 gigabyte high-speed card for $10. So very high quality piece of equipment for about half the price, 16 times the memory, and probably 2 to 3 times the data speed as well. So things have really changed. And one of the things that goes along with cheap data storage, of course, is going to be a huge increase in the amount of data stored. And, well, looking at what we're looking at this week is legal, ethical, and policy issues, and a lot of it has to do with data being stored. And, of course, you know, I work for Capella University, and we have laws regarding the keeping of student educational records. And my wife works in public schools, and they have laws, the same laws dealing with that as well. There's also people working with medical records. And so because we're having so much more being stored, I think it's pretty important to take a look at that. For example, here, this could be your educational record. Now, a big thing in elementary through high school is the taking of standardized tests. Now, that information will be taken and stored in aggregate separately, and what gets reported out to the newspapers, whatever else, the general public, is taken from that aggregate, and of course your kids' stuff will be put into the main record, but the stuff that is used is from outside, not stored in that record. And you know, I've had to take people to the doctor over the past few weeks, and one of the things I noticed was that we have a health record as well, where all the information goes into this record. Now the thing is, there are agencies, who else, we don't know, that will eventually want to look at certain health pieces of health information. Now, instead of having something being stored outside like aggregate standardized test scores like in the education realm, everything's going in here. So now future and even present legal, ethical, and policy issues will be, okay, who should have access to what is inside of this medical health record? And I think that's going to be something we really have to keep in mind as we go forward, because, well, there could be certain health information within this that someone could say, hey, the United States government needs to be able to control, let's say, health care such as heart disease, maybe some form of other disease that's out there. And maybe they want to take a look at this. Does X have the flu shot? Does X have certain inoculations? Who knows what? But, you know, everything's going to be stored here, and the potential for a lot of people to have potential access to that. So, again, going with the super cheap data storage that we're seeing now, what are we going to do to safeguard this information here as we go forward? And again, legal, ethical, and policy issues, even things as simple as email. For example, working at Capella, we do like to keep any kind of serious interaction, questions, etc. In case there is an issue with the professor or the course room, etc. We do like to keep that in email form so that it is documented in case someone says, I had a question about such and such, then we can go and look at the email just to be sure. It keeps everything safe because we know exactly what was talked about. Now, again, I know people who are out in the public schools, and depending on the exact school and the circumstances, etc., there is a much different feel about the use of email. In fact, while we really like to use email because it keeps things documented. In fact, we like to keep things within the course room email because that way it's all right there in a nice, tidy package. That way, in case there was a question about something, well, of course, we have the record and everything's fine. Because we'd like to be able to trust everyone and just keep everything nice and easy. Looking at other situations, for example, a school I used to deal with that one of my children used to go to would not deal at all in any kind of serious or semi-serious issue within the realm of email, because that becomes a written record. They have to keep it, etc., and it is proof of what was discussed. And I thought that was quite interesting. In other instances in public education, even getting outside of it, there is a desire to move away from email, because not only because it will be a permanent, semi-permanent record, but also the possibility that the wrong person may be CC'd on it or accidentally put in the two. While this really has not been an issue within our school here, I have seen it become issues in outside areas where somehow someone gets added onto the email chain, they're within the conversation, and they shouldn't. So, and again, if it is within a big organization, then suddenly you have to keep track of those emails. So it's something we have to really keep track of, because more and more things can be stored. More and more information, more and more communications, and the thing is, what are going to be the legal, ethical, and policy issues regarding that as we go forward? Even nowadays, because there is just so much communication and other fairly serious, important records, sensitive records that can potentially get into the wrong hands, even if they would fall within the realm of the organizations that should have access. So I think this is a pretty big issue. And when we're looking at our legal, ethical, and policy issue document, please don't skimp on it. It seems that within our documentation we're doing within the class, there's two documents. One of them is the dealing with lifelong learning from the first half of the documentation, and in the second half, the legal, ethical, and policy issues, where these tend to be sort of skimped over for some reason. Needs and risks is semi, where risks tend to be covered pretty well. A lot of learners do put in a decent risk matrix, but sort of blow off the needs end of it. Now remember, without any needs, you're not going to have any risks. So please do a good job on the needs side, because that's going to drive the risk. Because what you need to do to fulfill those needs is going to determine what needs to be executed, and that will drive what risks would come up. So please don't skimp on the needs. Please don't skimp too much on risks. In the risk matrix, please write things out in complete sentences. It will make a considerable difference. Also, going back to the legal, ethical, and policy issues, take a good look at that, because you'd be surprised what goes on in the legal area. Again, Capella, we deal with student records, and that's a pretty serious thing. Also, because we are a publicly held company, we have stock, there is Securities and Exchange Commission rules regarding that, and of course there's accounting rules, etc. So we do have a number of things that could potentially become an issue depending on the project. Ethical, of course, a lot of you are dealing with areas that deal with information, which of course could be sensitive, so please keep that in mind. And policies, well, and a lot of times there may not be a policy regarding some piece of IT that you're looking at, however, maybe there should be. Sort of an aside as far as a policy, for example, when I create things that put the Capella logo on it, there is a policy that says I have to put in writing Capella University with it. So there is rules, regulations, policies, I should say, that deal with the branding in the communications where I use the logo. That kind of thing may or may not be an issue, but of course, you know, take a reasonable look. Do the due diligence and don't leave too many stones unturned. It's pretty interesting, so have fun with it, learn, and of course, any questions, please let me know. And hope you all had a great Thanksgiving. We're coming up toward the end of the quarter. Also coming up will be the final presentation. I'll have more on that coming up, and hope everything else is going well, and have a great week. Thanks.